I never thought for a second that it would come down the hill. And that part of Palisades is dense city.
The answer is not to let's just get rid of nature, because that's why people want to be there, right?
It used to be every home over 6,000 square feet had that be sprinkled. Now, interior sprinkled.
Mm-hmm.
Now every house has to be sprinkled. Every house has to have a sprinkler system.
That's a big extra cost.
Yes, it's funny. I drive through Palisades quite often, and you know, it looks like a new home community because there's just nothing there anymore. It's just all dirt.
What lessons can we learn from all these disasters about building resilience into what we do? Hey friends, happy 2026 to you. We here at the Your Project Shepherd and Crafted Custom Homes team are gearing up for a really great year this year, and I hope that you are too. We have a lot of great new guests coming this year, as well as a few familiar faces who are going to be rejoining us, so I hope that you'll tune in regularly and check that out. So this is our first episode of the new year, and today we have something a little bit different for you. A first-time guest, although I've known this guy a lot longer than I'd like to admit. But before I introduce him, I want to give you a little bit of background on today's topic. We're recording this episode on January 7th, 2026. That is exactly 1 year to the day since the Los Angeles area of Southern California was hit by two massive wildfires at the same time. They both started the same day on different sides of the city in the Palisades and Eaton. Now, unless you've been living under a rock, and no matter what part of the country that you're in, I'm sure that you remember seeing those videos of all that devastation, seeing the news stories and hearing about that disaster. Those fires at that time burned around 40,000 acres. They destroyed over 16,000 structures. Took 31 lives, and they caused, they're still counting this, but between 65 and 140 billion dollars worth of damage with a B. It's a lot of damage, and that's not counting just the economic impact as well. So we're here in Houston, Texas, and we are about 1,500 miles away from Los Angeles. Obviously, totally different part of the country. Kind of Houston and LA are very different places, right? So what does all that stuff have to do with our area here in Houston? Well, our listeners here in Houston probably remember something that happened about 7-8 years ago, something called Hurricane Harvey. And that disaster cost the Houston area over $125 billion in damage. We lost over 100 lives in that storm. And almost 9 years later, we are still trying to recover from that disaster here in Houston. We're still tearing houses down, remediating houses. They're still dealing with lawsuits related to that. So that far out, we're still dealing with that, right? People watching up the East Coast might remember Hurricane Sandy a few years back. That one was $70 billion in damage, 254 lives lost. Just last year, Hawaii dealt with wildfires as well. They had 102 people that died, 2,200 structures burned, close to $6 billion in damages there. North Carolina, last year, record flooding. That was from a hurricane that came up through the East Coast. Record flooding in North Carolina killed 108 people, destroyed 1,400 homes, $53 billion in damage. So let all those numbers sink in for a minute. Just those 5 events that I mentioned were over $300 billion in losses, and almost 600 people lost, over 20,000 homes lost between those areas from those events. So the tie-in for the podcast and my question for the audience is, what lessons can we learn from all these disasters about building resilience into what we do? So after that long-winded intro, it's time to introduce my very esteemed guest. So sorry for the wait, Chris. Today is it's my great pleasure to welcome my very good friend, Chris Ferqueron with Costa Custom Homes in Los Angeles. I'm not going to do a big personal history or bio like I usually do, because we're actually going to record another episode after this one, and we're going to kind of talk about our lives, and so you'll get his full story on the next episode, and I want you to come back and listen to that. So, Chris, welcome.
Thank you.
That's a very short response after my big long intro.
Well, I didn't know how to add to that. It was great.
So you were really close to those fires, weren't you?
I was, yes. I actually had a project in the Palisades, and I was there that day. And the when it first started, the fires are up in the mountain, and that's not uncommon in Los Angeles. We'll see fire, we'll see smoke, we'll see fire up in the mountains, and we always just assume it stays up there. The helicopters start flying around, and they usually contain it up in the mountain. I never thought for a second that it would come down the hill. And that part of Palisades is dense city. It's, a grid system of streets. There's very little vegetation down in the actual Palisades. So this fire is burning up in the old vegetation that's been there for centuries, right? And it was just burning through that. And I was at the site, and we were looking up, and it was windy that day. We were looking up, and it kept getting a little closer and closer. But I still never thought to myself that fire is going to come down, burn through the Palisades. It might get a couple homes up in the mountains, but never thought for a second. And one of my guys working there that day said, "Oh, they just closed down the PCH, and that's usually my way to get home." And now I knew I had to drive the other way into the city to get on the 405, and everybody knows what the 405 is like, right? Especially if everybody's going there. So I just said, "Hey, let's get out of here." And it was like 4:00 in the afternoon. I said, "Let's just get out of here. I don't want to get stuck in traffic longer than I have to." So we go home, and when I got over to the 405 is a little bit elevated, and I looked, and I thought to myself, I'm like, that fire is really low. But I still never thought it would burn like that. And I get home, woke up the next morning, and they said Palisades is gone on the news. Palisades is gone. And I was like, "You mean the hills?" And no, it was the entire area. And like I said, it's dense city. And I just never thought a fire could burn like that through it. But it was hurricane force winds, 75, 100 mile an hour winds. It was super dry. And then it was just like a blast furnace. I mean, everybody saw videos of it.
Yeah.
It's like a blast furnace just blowing through. And what also didn't help is that there's a reservoir. There was reports of firefighters hooking up to the fire hydrants and no water's coming out. Right. And so there was a reservoir at the top of the mountain that was specifically for fighting fires for the Palisades. And it was empty. It was 117 million gallons of water. And I don't know who made the decision. That's the big talk around LA right now, is somebody made the decision like, well, they have to do maintenance on this reservoir. So they drain the reservoir, and then they're trying to get the permits, right? I guess they get the permits from themselves, right? Yeah. So I said that's the equivalent of a builder like us ripping the roof off of a house during the rainy season, and then going and applying for a permit, right? So there's a lot of finger pointing around that, and I've listened to several other podcasts actually, and a lot of news stories out there. I don't know if it travels outside of LA, but a lot of talk about who's at fault for that. There's definitely negligence in that, but I think the Palisades fire was actually, it's not even a theory or opinion. It was made worse because of that. You can't fight fire without water. Yeah. Right. So, but anyway, that was something that was, again, I'll reiterate again, nobody ever saw that coming. Yeah. Something like that.
I was worried about you guys because I saw the news, and I was looking at the map, and I'm looking at where you live in Thousand Oaks, which isn't that far away. Yeah. And I was like, man, like you guys have to be a little concerned, right? Yeah.
It's, I guess, coming from Florida, people say like, did you worry about hurricanes? And even here in Houston, did you? We worry about hurricanes when the spaghetti model has it coming right over my house, right? Mm-hmm. Other than that, you kind of used to it, Mm-hmm. So same thing in California with fires. Like I said, we're not nonchalant. It's just you get kind of used to it. That usually they stay up in the mountains. Mm-hmm. And maybe like 10 years ago, 12 years ago, we had a fire burn right through our community. And so one of the resilient things that they do in new communities. See, I live in a new community, right? They have a fire buffer behind the houses, and there's wild sagebrush and chaparral, and that stuff it lights and it burns like a wildfire, right? Right? It burns hot, it burns fast, but when it gets to I live on an area that has a fire break right behind it. It's about a 60-foot break, and they cut down those bushes, and it's just grass, but it's brown grass, right? And that we watched those fires burn right down. I mean, in my community, the fires are right behind my house, and they burn down to that fire break and then just go out. So that's really, but see, like in older areas where they didn't have that, where you have like farms and like little houses that go up in these canyons, they don't have that. So once a fire lights in those mountains, that's when that's the homes you usually hear about, is the ones that are brush all around them, no fire break. They're even some of them have wood shingle roofs, because nobody thought about it. It's kind of like when we used to build houses in flood areas or hurricane areas, and we build them right on the ground, right, at 6 feet above sea level. And you learn from your mistakes, and you don't do that anymore. So that's what the new codes are doing.
Yeah. How long did it take to kind of like for people around there to realize, or for you to realize, like the scale of what's happening in general? I mean, was this something at first where you're like, okay, obviously this is awful, it took out the Palisades, but they'll probably get this under control and it'll be done in a couple of days, right? I mean, how long did it take where you were like, oh crap, this thing's gotten really big and it's going to take a while?
You mean the fire?
Yeah.
Actually, that fire got so big so fast, it burned down all of Palisades in one night. So, like I said, I went to bed that night thinking what you just said.
Yeah.
They'll get under control. It'll be fine, right? Maybe it'll burn for a few days, but it'll stay up in the mountains. We woke up the next morning and they were like, Palisades is gone.
But it took like a month to get all of it out, right? Because it was the Palisades, then it spread like kind of around the city, right?
Yeah, it was burning this. It was burning the chaparral in these areas that are, they want to contain that so it doesn't spread to other areas outside Palisades.
Yeah.
So yeah, it did take like a month, but it was kind of like the Palisades, the Palisades village getting burned down. That was kind of like the punch in the mouth. Everything else after that was just like, just residual. It almost seemed like, which no disrespect to anybody's house that burned down after that, but it was really like, wow, look, everybody's still focused on Palisades when it was still burning elsewhere. Because the places it was burning elsewhere was just wildlife.
Okay,
yeah,
gotcha.
It was just burning vegetation. It wasn't burning structures anymore.
Yeah, I was looking at, I guess NASA had like some time lapse video of the Palisades fire, the Eaton fire, and it kind of showed them over the course of a few days how they were kind of growing, like almost like coming together. In the middle, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and actually during that time, there was another one that started. Now that you mentioned that, there was another one that started in the Hollywood Hills, and that one is densely populated, and it's what I just mentioned. It's densely populated. There's mountains that go right through the city. Santa Monica Mountains go right through the city, Hollywood Hills, and in the Hollywood Hills they don't have that buffer like I was talking about, right? So that's actually the worst case scenario. And that as a small fire started, I say small, like, several acres, it could have very easily spread just because we still had the same conditions. It was still windy, still dry. Firefighters are fighting these other areas. So everybody's stretched thin. So that was a concern, but they were able to get that one out pretty quickly.
What made that fire so impactful? You mentioned like a lack of a buffer zone. But outside of that, like what made that so much worse than other fires that kind of occur in that area on a regular basis?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've been speaking about the Palisades, but there's also that Eaton fire, which was, Altadena, right? So both of those were impactful because they burned through cities, right? And typically we don't see that, I thought like it's a concrete jungle, right? There's nothing here to burn, but obviously there is, right? That's what really made it most impactful. Like these other fires I've been talking about and we see on the news, those burn through vegetation. They get a house here and there, but to just burn, I mean, it's almost like the San Francisco fire of like 1906 or whenever that was, right? Just like entire city burns down.
Just goes from one structure to the next.
Yeah. And 6,000 houses in the Palisades alone. And if it's hard to put that in perspective, but it's several square miles. I talk to people outside the city, and I try to think of the city they live in. I'm like, picture an area this big, every house gone, every grocery store gone, everything's just gone. And when I say that, it really puts it in perspective. I don't know Houston well enough to put it in perspective here, but it's an area several miles by several miles, every structure.
That would be like the Houston Heights, which is like a older community right in the middle of the city that's about that size. That would be that entire community being gone in one night.
Yeah. Interestingly, I say every structure. What's interesting is it's 99% of the structures. You'll see every structure burned down and then one standing. And it's inexplicable, right? Why it just goes down the street, a grid system of streets. Every structure is gone except for that one and that one.
Is that because those were newer homes built?
No. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. I mean, there's houses in the Palisades now that are built in the 40s, and the house right next to it, on either side, back of it, all gone except for that one house. I have no idea. Right? It's inexplicable.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that I'd want to be that one that's left. It's like, do you want to be the only house standing with a bunch of damage, or just
it's kind of like
start over?
Yeah, it's kind of like a new community is when you're the first guy in the new community and you have to live in the construction site for 4 or 5 years.
Right.
So we're seeing houses pop up now in Palisades, and along with the ones that are there. And some people have said that, like, well, I'm not in a big hurry to get back building because I don't want to be the first guy on the block. They'd rather the community start coming back.
Right.
And I tell, a couple of clients have said that to me, and I tell clients, I'm like, you never know what the future is going to hold. I'd say, there's going to be a bottleneck of everything, labor shortages for this. You got to rebuild 6,000 houses, There's labor shortages, material bottlenecks, permitting bottlenecks. So I tell clients, let's get back in there right now.
Plus, it already takes over a year, a year or two. I'm not sure in your area, but it takes a while to build a house anyway.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. You don't want to delay a long trip if you're gonna have to do it.
Yeah. Part of the beauty of living in an area like that part of California is that you have this proximity to nature, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I see you posting videos of walking your dog out on the trails behind your house.
Probably incessantly. I think everybody's getting sick of them.
I'm like, there's Chris posting a dog walking video again.
Right. Should be working, but he's posting dog walking videos.
He likes his dog's butt on pictures. Yeah. So part of the beauty is that you're living in this area that has this gorgeous area right behind it, right?
Yeah.
So, and I see this and I'm like, why am I living in Houston when I can go live in a place like that?
Yeah. Yeah.
But the answer to this problem is not, let's cut nature back away from the neighborhood. I mean, obviously you can do a fire break or whatever, but the answer is not to let's just get rid of nature, because that's why people want to be there, right?
Yeah.
So we have to build our homes and our communities to work within the environment,
right?
And to live and work with that environment and to be a part of the environment. That's what people want. So, what changes are as the rebuilding is starting to take place? Codes are changing. What changes are being made now to deal with that and to prevent a repeat of that in the future? Yeah.
So, I don't know about this specific one, but just like every time there's a pretty substantial hurricane, usually every state upgrades their permitting, or not their permitting, their codes, right? I remember when I was building in Florida, it was the Hurricane Andrew code in '92, right? Was well more stringent than anything that was built in the 70s and 80s, right? And then after that, it was the 2004 hurricane season, of which I was in Florida for that. The 2004 hurricane season. After that, there was a big upgrade of codes, right? So same thing with earthquake code and fire code out in California. After the 1994, I forget the name of it, Loma Prieta earthquake. It was in the North Valley. That earthquake was pretty substantial, and so a lot of code changed after that. So each one of these fires, there was a fire a few years ago that burned the Paradise, California, up northern California. So we're seeing codes for fire. I know we're specifically talking about fire right now. So one main thing they do in California is they want to keep vegetation away from the house, right? The resilient materials would be like obviously stucco, hardy board, and then in the eaves they want heavy timber or stucco, and no attic vents, because once flame gets in the attic, it's over, right? And then also, if the overhang of the house, that's usually where it gets, because the fire gets close to it and it starts burning in a circle around, and it gets in the eaves, right? So the code also says every home, it used to be every home over 6,000 square feet had that be sprinkled. Now interior sprinkled.
Mm-hmm.
Now every house has to be sprinkled. Every
house.
Every house has to have a sprinkler system.
That's a big extra cost.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I usually say it's about $1.75 a square foot, right?
Okay.
Or $2 a square foot to sprinkle a house. It's not huge.
Not that bad.
That's not that bad. So there's that, and then now they're starting to sprinkle the eaves on the outsides with the interior sprinkler system. So if a fire gets close, this thing will pop down and spray water on it. And on top of that, this technology has been around forever, but now everybody's getting kind of clued in on it, is sprinkling the roofs, right? So they'll have a separate system with a separate water supply. Either they pump it out of the pool, or they pump I don't know what the chemical is, but they pump a chemical out of this and it sprays the roof, right? So, I mean, some of them in the past look just like a one of those rainbird sprinkler heads, and they'll just pop up and they'll just spray the roof, right? And now they're getting more sophisticated where they'll spray out, they'll spray the roof, but they'll also spray out beyond the perimeter of the structure. They're spraying the plants, everything, right? But the key thing is, like I mentioned, you had that reservoir that was empty. You have to have a municipal supply of water, or some supply of water. If you can't depend on the municipal supply, you have to either pump it out of your pool, or have another tank that you can pump it out of. And like in an area like Houston, you could say you could have a cistern that catches rainwater, but it never rains in California except in the winter, right? And that's not fire season. So you could collect water all winter and store it, right? So there's California is a different animal where it's water deprived anyway, and it's also dry, and it's also fire prone. So you have to have the supply of water.
I wonder what happens when all those house sprinklers start running at once, and all the water pressure in the neighborhood drops. That's no water.
Yeah, that's kind of why I was saying you can't depend. Obviously, we just found out you can't depend on the municipal supply. So that's why we're looking at one now on a house I'm doing in California, and we're talking about just hooking a pump up to the pool. And a pool could be, 10, 20,000 gallons of water. You don't have to have this thing running the entire fire, just only when the fire gets close. So 10 or 20,000 gallons of water should do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It seems like after any disaster, there's always this big push to make code changes, like you said, after any type of disaster.
Yeah.
And all those changes always come with a cost. It's one of the reasons it costs more to build a house today than it did way back. And obviously part of it's just inflation and the cost of things, but the complexity of houses has gotten more and more as we add all these additional systems.
It's like our cars we drive too.
Yeah.
Cars are more expensive because they have a lot of computers in them, a lot of safety standards. Same thing with houses.
Yeah. So all these things just drive up cost. Aside from additional costs caused by building code, what else is affecting building costs out there as this rebuilding process takes place? I mean, you mentioned labor, material, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean labor and supply chain, that's going to drive up cost. Supply and demand, right? It's the oldest economic principle, right? But on top of that, like you mentioned, everything. Even adding sprinkler systems, adding heavy timber on, adding things that are a double pane window is a fire code, right? That's more expensive. The Class A fire roofs are, which I don't know if that's a familiar term. And no, Class A fire roof is actually they rate it on the system, right? So the roof is only as strong as its weakest link, right? So Class A fire rating is you have to match certain items throughout the whole system, right? So let's say if you have a barrel tile roof, like a Spanish tile roof, one of the things they want you to have is at the end of the barrel tile, you have to have a bird stop, right? Mm-hmm. And it used to be, the thought they call it bird stop.
Wire mesh.
Yeah, wire mesh, or they pack it full of mud, right? But under that, the underlayment needs to be Class I fire rated. That means it's got a fire rating on that.
You can't have just exposed OSB or something like that.
Yeah. Right. And then the other thing is you can't have any open vents, right? So if you have all the other things, but you have open vents or all the other things and you don't have a bird stop, then that fire can get in a certain way, right? And even when they're stacking that tile, you have to have enough of that mortar to fill in the cracks, so no fire can get in, no embers. Fire's not getting it. It's an ember that blows in this wind, like I told you, 100-mile-an-hour wind. It blows that ember up in there, and that ember starts burning. So, Class A fire rating there's several ways to get it, but they look at the whole system and they rate it that way.
So when you're doing, when you can't do vents in a roof, are you now being kind of domino effect? Like now you have to do spray foam insulation.
Yeah, and that's a good point.
You're not doing ventilated attics, so now that translates into spray foam, which translates into probably like electric or heat pump furnaces.
Yes, and then you're thinking like, how do you keep moisture content down you don't want to have a sealed environment where it creates mold or mildew or whatever. So there's you can have vents, but they have to be on the top, and it's not like in areas like this and in Florida, you'll have they want a cross ventilation. You have a soffit vent and a roof vent.
Right.
California, they just have a roof vent, like a off ridge vent.
Okay.
Right, or a ridge vent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we are transitioning to basically being all spray foam attics, all sealed attic enclosures. But that is more expensive than doing a traditional ventilated attic with the top and bottom vents.
Yeah.
So a lot of these code changes, you can't just look at I have to add $500 for this. Well, no, now you have to add that $500 plus all these other little things that you're being forced to adopt as well. So that starts translating to bigger and bigger amounts of money.
Yeah. Yeah.
So labor shortages, material costs, code upgrades, all that kind of stuff is increasing costs. But what that also translates to, though, is that now the homes are, even aside from being safer as far as fire goes, they're also generally now more energy efficient. They're more durable. They're just better built homes now.
They are,
which means they're going to be long term a better place to live. Or hopefully, have a longer lifespan than the old structures.
Yeah.
I would assume that when people are planning these things, if they're dealing with a contractor, a builder who doesn't work in these areas, that's not familiar with these things, I'm saying this because I've heard stories and I've seen, in fact, I know a couple of guys who are moving into California to kind of capitalize on the disaster, right?
Yeah.
And kind of ambulance chasing. People go into Florida after a hurricane or Texas after a hurricane and open up shop and start trying to build houses, right? So people who are just moving into these areas that aren't familiar with some of these requirements, they might have in their head, oh, I can build a house for $250 a foot, $300 a foot, right?
Yeah, just like where I came from.
Yeah, just like in Florida, just like in Houston, right?
Yeah.
And so they roll out there, and wow, the labor's more expensive out here. Wow, the materials are more expensive because they're shorter in supply, and wow, all these extra codes exist, and all of a sudden things cost more. So I can see like local homeowners getting taken advantage of by somebody coming in who says, "Oh yeah, we can do this for X amount," right?
That's happening right now, and I see a lot of. It's funny. I drive through Palisades quite often, and it looks like a new home community because there's just nothing there anymore. It's just all dirt and streets, right? Lots of signs up, and I don't recognize hardly any of them. Obviously we know our peers, we know our competitors in town. Mm-hmm. You recognize them, and most of them I respect and like, right? And I see their sign up. I'm like, good. That's a good builder. I respect them, right? But I hardly see anybody that I know on these signs. A few, maybe 10%.
Yeah.
Everybody else is somebody that's either, let's say they're from LA and they just open now they're a home builder, right? Mm-hmm. Or somebody coming from out of state and setting up shop and having a law office. The interesting part is, I don't think the homeowners, especially in Palisades. I can't really speak much of Altadena because I'm not from there. I don't live there, right? Mm-hmm. It's 70 miles away from where I live, right? But I know Palisades is a very tight-knit community, and the homeowners are, or the residents are, kind of akin to that now, and I think they're watching out for it. They don't want that. They want somebody that knows the nuance of building in Southern California and Los Angeles, right? So there's a lot, and like I said, there's a lot of nuance in building there.
I would assume that there's contractor license in California, right?
There is,
Okay.
yeah. But I mean, you can always get somebody else's license and build under that license and attach it to your business. You know? And to be honest with you, it's not that hard to get a license. You have to sit for the test and pay a fee. You know, so if somebody had a license in another state, the California testing is not that really that. I took the Florida test. Florida test is 10 times harder than the California test.
Really?
Yeah. And so, yeah, it's people can come in and get a license and get a corporation set up pretty quick.
You would think that just with some of the nuance that's there with earthquakes and fires and things like that, and just honestly a lot of the kind of the green restrictions that California has, do you think that those tests would be just as hard as a place like Florida that deals with hurricanes and things like that?
Yeah. When I took the test, the hardest part was the law section, right? And it still wasn't that hard. It was just it was harder than the building code section.
Yeah.
I think the reason why why it's like that is the building code section is enforced by certain tiers, right? The law section is really about integrity, you know, and so there's more of a gray area in the law section. Even though the law is written, it's not the laws aren't enforced by they are enforced by the CSLB, but they're not enforced daily, right? Like a building code would.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, there's the building inspector. There's not a
exactly.
there's not an honesty inspector.
Yeah, and actually in California, there's a building inspector, but also on top of that, the building department wants to be protected, so you have a deputy inspector that's paid to come inspect, and also a structural engineer has to have that's probably the same here. You have to have you have the structural engineer has to sign off, and then the deputy inspector has to sign off, and even on a concrete pour, deputy inspector has to be present, checking the PSI of the concrete,
really, and
sign off on it. And then when the building inspector comes, he just checks really the deputy inspector, and he looks at other things too. But very first thing he asks for when he walks on the site is, "Let me see your deputy inspection. Let me see your structural review."
Well, I mean, it sounds like a lot of extra hassle, but I think from a consumer's perspective, it's probably not a bad thing because, I mean, here in Houston and Texas, most of Texas, there's no, the only inspection is the building inspector. The engineer doesn't have to come. There's nobody else. Yeah. And honestly, the building inspector is doing so many houses in a day. He's just popping by looking at it. Oh yeah, it looks good. See ya. Yeah, right. Yeah. And he's not really digging into it. So that kind of scenario is probably honestly better for the consumer.
It is. But again, when you go back to the cost, it costs money to have your structural engineer come out and inspect. It costs money for a deputy inspector to inspect, right? So each one of those visits is $1,000, right? And they're there all the time, and it's just, so that it's a level of protection for the client, but just like anything else, it costs money.
Yeah. Hey, let's kind of go back to again thinking about fire resiliency. We talked about materials, about certain exterior materials, roofing materials, assemblies, things like that. Looking more at like design of houses, is design is the way the house is designed as important as the materials that were used in building it, and what are some design strategies or ideas or things that can help a house have a better chance of survival? Yeah, well,
a modern design inherently is not going to have a combustible roof. It's not going to have overhangs, right? A lot of times a modern house is going to be stucco or concrete or brick, right? So that's going to be more fire resilient. So
metal on the roof, TPO on the roof.
Yeah. I mean, there's one house in Malibu. It's not in Palisades. It's Malibu. It's right on the PCH. But this fire burned through Palisades, went around the corner, burned down to the ocean, and it burned every house down that was right on the ocean.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
I say every house, almost every house, right? There's this one house that still looks unscathed, but it's poured in place concrete, right? And it looks like it's gorgeous. It looks like a bunker though, right? And that thing, I think you just pressure wash the soot off of it and it's good to go, right? And then there's a couple other houses that, they're covered in, they look traditional, right? But they have, instead of if you're going to have a cedar shake roof if it's a Cape Cod house, if you're in Cape Cod, you have a cedar shake roof. California, you can't do that anymore. They did it for a long time, and then like I said before, they learn from that.
Yeah.
But now they have composite material that looks just like cedar shake. You can't tell from the street, and you're never going to climb up on the roof and touch it. If you touch it, you can tell, right? But there's another house that's covered in hardy board cedar shakes, not wood cedar shake, covered in this composite cedar shake roof, and doesn't have big overhangs. And if the overhangs are there, they're the hardy board, and the corbels that have the brackets, and it's all fire resistant material. And so that, I mean, now we're getting into the materials that wasn't your question, but that has a smaller overhang, and that kind of made it where that house was fire resilient.
Yeah. So things like the design of roof lines and honestly, kind of the design of the house, maybe not as much as the design of the site, the site and the site layout, but you mentioned like roof design, like a flat roof or a single pitch roof, something that doesn't have a whole bunch of complicated roof intersections coming together, where there's more opportunities for blown embers to get blown up in a nook or cranny and find a way in, right? So simpler roof lines, but really just kind of the site design, right? And how the site interfaces with the slope.
Yes.
And and kind of what's around it. Landscape design, a lot of that has a lot to do with it too. Yeah.
Now that there's a trend going, it's also to conserve water, but it's also fire resilience as well. Native plants are going to be more fire resilient than willow trees or jacarandas that are planted everywhere, or olive trees. Olive trees are very popular in new construction in California, but you want to keep all that away from the house. You want to keep everything kind of low flow, low flow as far as the water usage, and also low flow as far as like how they grow. You don't want these big bushes around your house.
Right. More like xeriscaping.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are there, so you build typically a little bit more upper end house, luxury homes. I think that people have a concern sometimes when you start talking about all these different requirements for anything. So if we're here floodproofing, a lot of this stuff ends up looking ugly, right? Are there concerns that people have with, or any issues with trying to build a luxury house, but then still trying to have some of these requirements met?
I don't think so. I mean, just this doesn't have anything to do with fire, but to save water, been doing this in Florida forever, is capturing the water that's on the site, right, and keeping it. They were starting to require having like a storage tank, and those are pretty ugly, and unless you bury them, and bury them is a big expense, right? So a lot of times they're stuck on the side of the house, and they capture water. They only capture a couple 100 gallons, so it's not. I don't know really the point of it, because that's not going to last. Like I mentioned earlier, it's not going to last you all summer, right? That's really the only thing I can think of that would really impact. The other things are they just cost money, right?
Yeah.
But you can integrate them and still have them look good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I would assume on your luxury homes, like you're probably already doing a lot of this stuff anyway.
Yeah.
Even aside from that, you're already using double or triple pane glass. You're already using, a lot of those materials anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. And we, the homes we build are ultra high end finishes, even behind what you can see, not even the finishes, ultra high end, waterproofing. That's above and beyond minimum building code.
Yeah.
Right. Structural, that's above and beyond any, I mean, a lot of it's over engineered, right? There's so much money spent in structural steel and concrete. And, if you build a house on a hillside, it used to be a time you could just put a footing in the ground, even if it's on a hillside, and just build it. Right now, it's like every single pile goes down the bedrock. They actually design it. This is getting off the subject a little bit, but they actually design it engineering wise to where if there was a mudslide and the entire house, the entire hillside went away, the house would still be standing.
Yeah.
Right. So that costs a lot of money, every step of the way. A site wall. I have a project now that, there's a site wall that was there, and it was about a 3-foot tall sidewall, but then there was a mountainside that went up, and the client wanted to pick up this space, right? So you go from a 3-foot sidewall that was built in the 80s, and now you go back even just 15 feet. Now you have a 15-foot or 20-foot vertical face, and the engineering in that sidewall, it would hold up a freeway. You know, it's just, it's, I don't want to say it's ridiculous. I almost said it's ridiculous. I don't want to say that. It's required, but that adds cost.
Yeah.
You know,
a lot of this stuff is insurance driven too. Like the insurance companies are not going to insure that property on the hillside unless that is engineered like that.
Yeah.
And I would assume that after the fires, a lot of insurance companies aren't going to insure these properties unless they're built to a minimum fire standard, regardless of
100%
code, right?
Yeah.
Because for them, I mean, I'm sure the insurance companies just took a bath on that whole thing.
Yeah. Well, you know, there's a whole background story to that where, you know, these insurance companies have actuaries that calculate risk, right? And they saw in Palisades, they saw a reservoir that was empty, vegetation that hadn't been maintained. You know, like I'm saying, like keep up in the mountains, they can keep vegetation trimmed back, you know. They saw all that, and they started canceling policies before this fire, almost like a prophecy, like they knew it was coming.
Wow. Right.
So now that they're coming back in, right? They're requiring, they learn from their mistakes too, right? They're not in the business of paying out more than they bring in, right? Yeah. So nobody is, right? Yeah. So they are saying like, hey, if we're going to insure this property, sometimes you can't get insurance. That's a whole other thing. Kind of like in areas probably like here, but in Florida, there's so many losses that the insurance companies say we can't even write flood insurance in Florida, so you have to have a state fund, right? Yep. And that's being talked about, and that's being implemented in California, where sometimes you have an insurance policy and they can't even get insurance. Actually, the one house I'm building right now, it doesn't have any vegetation around it. It's an acre and there's no trees around this house, but he can't get insurance. And luckily he can, he's paying cash for the house. He doesn't have to have insurance.
He's got to self-insuring it now.
He's got to self-insure it. So he said, he came to me and he said, hey, look, I'm going to self-insure this place, but I still want it protected. What can I do? And I said, we can do this, this, and this. And one of the things I said to him is we can put sprinklers on the roof. I mean, this house has hardy board siding, stone, multiple pane windows, right? A metal roof, nothing around it, lots of hardscape around it, right? And he still wants to do the sprinkles on the roof. Yeah. It's just like belts and suspenders, right?
Yeah.
So you can see if he's self-insuring, that's the same way the insurance companies would be like, hey, we don't want to have a loss. And sometimes people can't even afford they can afford the house. They can't afford the house and the insurance.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm sure that's true here, in Florida, you know?
Yeah, I mean, we in the areas that have flooded or that are in the FEMA flood zones, once a structure has tapped that policy, I think it's more than twice, they will not pay out on it anymore.
Right.
So now you have to tear that house down. You have to build it up, and you can get it insured, but you get to build it up 2 feet above the minimum the 500-year base flood elevation. Yeah. So, I mean, it's going to be Noah's Ark with giraffes floating down the street before that thing floods again, right?
Yeah.
But so and that kind of goes back to design. I was asking if any of these things are kind of affecting design, and is it ugly with any of these features? One of the big things that happened here after Harvey, when people started rebuilding, we were forced to build up 3, 4, 5, 8 feet in some areas.
Yeah.
And it's hard to make that house look good in a neighborhood with a bunch of 1950s ranches that are sitting at ground level.
Yeah.
It's like how do you make the first finished floor is 8 feet off the ground? How do you make that look good?
Yeah.
And so honestly, the first kind of generation of those that came through were pretty ugly.
Yeah.
But now over time, architects have figured out how to approach that to make it look like it was meant to be there. It's not like a beach house on stilts in the middle of the neighborhood.
Right. I looked at a house in Florida to bid one time, probably a couple of years ago, and it was after Maybe it was a year ago. It was after that the two storms just went through. One of them was Helene, right?
Mm-hmm.
That went through, and that area that storm did not hit Tampa Bay, Florida, but it caused a storm surge, and so now they're rethinking their code, right? And I was talking to an architect and the owner, and I kind of had this idea in my head. I'm like, instead of having it 8 feet off the ground, you still have it 8 feet off the ground, but what if you build some site walls under the house and you push the dirt up to it, so it just looks like it's like on a little hill. And they're like, no, because all that dirt's going to get washed away, right? So you can't really, and they want that water to flow freely under the house too. That's another thing, So there's lots of different ways they think about this.
Yeah, we've started integrating parking underneath the houses, basically putting the garage under the house.
Yeah.
And having like covered outdoor living spaces under the house.
Sure.
And,
I think that's the only thing you can do. Really,
yeah. But there's ways to make it look good, right? But anytime these new things are kind of forced on you, it takes a little time to figure it out. But once one smart person figures it out, everybody starts copying them. And it starts looking better.
Yeah.
So we've been talking about fire resiliency in y'all's community. But since people are being forced to rebuild now, are they looking at, hey, since I'm rebuilding, I'm also going to integrate some of these other non-fire related resiliency things, like because you guys deal with like power shortages too, like brownouts and earthquakes, you mentioned things like that, water shortages.
Yep.
So as you're rebuilding, are you also starting to address other areas of resiliency?
Oh yeah, for the past few years, it's been common for people to want either a backup generator for an earthquake, or now battery backup. Like a Tesla Powerwall or something even more robust than that. The interesting part about I think the generators is the main thing. Because you mentioned that we have power outages. It's pretty common, right? Especially in the summer. Well, it's kind of funny too, because California Power Grid. They say, oh, well, this is going to be a hot summer. It's going to be like in the 90s, right? And so you have to conserve you run your HVAC, you have to conserve power. And there's whole swaths of the country like this one, right? Where the AC runs almost year long, right? And in California, I always think it's kind of comical that California is like, oh, it's a scorcher out there today. It's above 80, right? And I have to use my HVAC, so please conserve power, right?
Yeah.
But that aside, people do, like in a shaker, in an earthquake, very first thing that happens is the power goes out, right? So people want a backup generator. The crux of it is the second thing that goes out is the gas, because everything has the natural gas, right? Because everything has an earthquake valve on it, because they don't want a bunch of, so if there's a shaker, the earthquake valve shuts the gas off.
Right. It's another generator doesn't work.
Yes. So now what do we do for the generator? So then it's like, do we store diesel? Then you do a diesel generator or just a regular gas. Then you have to store fuel, and fuel goes bad afterwards. So there's these power walls, the battery backups, they're really the next. They recharge off the municipal supply when it's there, and when it goes out, your house runs off the battery backup.
Mm-hmm.
And just like anything, the more expensive you get, the longer it'll, if you have just parts of your house that run off of it, like if, let's say here, there's a hurricane, you lose power. Well, just as long as my HVAC can run off of it and a couple lights and my refrigerator, I'm happy.
Yeah. Same
thing in California, right? So you probably don't need your HVAC, because you very rarely need an HVAC in Southern California or most of California. So as long as you can run your appliances,
keep your food from spoiling,
and some lights on, right? Then people are happy. So I think that's the biggest thing is the battery backups.
I would assume that a lot of the earthquake stuff is kind of already built into the code anyway, isn't it?
Yeah, that's long been being built in the code. And it's interesting too, because I know you have hurricane code here. Mm-hmm. The earthquake code is very similar to hurricane code as far as lateral,
like a lot of strapping.
Yeah.
Bracing.
Because in a hurricane you have uplift, right? The wind wants to pull the roof off the house, so you have to strap everything down. In earthquake code, there is lateral movement, but a lot of the times it's up and down movement on an earthquake. It's like a shaker, like shakes up and down. There's two types, right? But This one is a lateral shift, and there's already been building code for that for a long time. But
Yeah.
now the one that's very similar to the hurricane code is the up and down, which is when I first moved out there, 17 years ago. I was surprised that's the one thing I did know about building in California because like I said before about the nuance of people coming in there. When I moved out to California, I was surprised at how different it was building out there, right? And but that's one of the similar things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk about permitting for a second. Has the permitting process changed, and is it taking like a lot of time to get a permit these days in these areas, or have they found ways to expedite that and work around it?
Well, they at first, it was all over the news. Like, oh, there's certain layers of the permitting process out. There's the Coastal Commission, there's the city, and then there's also if you're City of LA or City of Beverly Hills or City of Santa Monica, each one of those has its own, right? So when this Palisades fires first happened, the city the permitting office did ramp up, right? They made like a triage center, right? They had another building that they leased out, got it all set up with everything they're going to need, but they did it preemptively, right? Because nobody was ready to submit for a permit yet, right? So they had all these people sitting around, and there's a big tsunami of permits still. I mean, plans and that's going to be submitted. Right now, they're trickling in because we're still today is
1 year.
1 year. Yeah. But you figure people that lost their house at first, there's shock, and then what are we going to do? They're looking for a place to live, right? So they do that. Then they're dealing with their insurance company. How much am I getting from the insurance company? Then they go through the process of now I have to, and a lot of people don't know this process. I have to hire an architect, engineers, and I have to design this house, think about that, and then after all that's done, then I have to go find a builder, right, and submit for a permit. So that process is still. I mean, I think the ones that we see the building right now were the ones that were already in process or already had a permit because they were just getting ready to start construction, right?
Yeah.
Those are the ones first. The next phase is people that got right on it and they went back with like in kind, like for like, right? So the building code the permitting process is much quicker right now if you do 110%. If you're within 110% of the footprint that was there. That Governor Newsom signed an executive order or whatever, saying that if it's within 110% of the original footprint, Coastal Commission will not be engaged. But if you go to 111%, then Coastal Commission can take a couple of years, right? So, and I will say basement does not count for that. So if people want to add a basement, there's another level of permitting process they have to go through, but it's still not Coastal Commission, right? So I think they are ramping up pretty quick. From what I hear, if you're going back like for like, people are getting permits in 30 days.
Wow. Which
in California, that's unheard of.
What's a typical permitting time?
A year.
Wow.
Yeah, or more. If you have to go through Coastal Commission, it could be 2-3 years.
Jeez.
Yeah, and several $100,000, right? And you may have to sue your neighbors to get the permit. So it's a legal process, right? So I will say, I think the city did ramp up. I think if you're going back like in kind, they are turning around pretty quick. Which, I saw a story in the news one night, and I thought it was slightly unfair. And I'm the first guy to get in line and say, like, the permitting process in Los Angeles and those municipalities in Southern California is ridiculous, right? First guy to say that. But I saw a newscast when they were saying, like, oh, the city of LA, they were criticizing the city of LA. City of LA said that we're going to get permits quickly and blah, blah, blah. But only 10, 15 permits have been given so far. When I was like, well, that's not really fair because, like I said earlier, people haven't submitted to get the permits yet, right? That day's coming. We'll see how it shakes out. I mean, it's still a year later. I think they're still not getting the level of permitting submittals that they will be getting.
Probably over the next 12 months.
I think this is hard. This is in the bell-shaped curve. This is going to be the peak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, typical architectural design time is 3 to 6 months, and then
Right.
you got the engineering time, and
Yeah.
and then, like you said, pricing from the builder, whatever,
Yeah.
can take a year just to plan the house before you can start construction. So,
Yeah.
or submit for permits rather.
Yeah. And actually, like one of the things I mentioned about if somebody wants to put a basement in their house, that there's a building permit, but now that you've put a basement in the house, now there's a grading permit and a haul route permit. Haul route permit is when you excavate that dirt, right? You put it in a truck and you haul it out.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they don't want dump trucks just running. So you have to apply for what route you're going to take out of the city.
Oh my gosh!
Right. So that you might have your grading permit, you might have your building permit, and they're like, well, hold on, now you have to get a grading permit, and that's a whole different. Then you have to get the shoring approved and the structure engineer to look at the shoring, get that approved, and then right when you think you're done, they're like, well, now you have your building permit and your grading permit, but now you need your haul route permit, right? So that's what takes a long time in California. The bottleneck of the bureaucracy around that the permitting process is mind numbing.
Yeah, that's when I'm glad that we live in Texas and not California right there.
Yeah, yeah.
It's all the red tape.
I talked to a buddy who's building a house in Florida, and he said, yeah, the permit's taking forever. He goes, it's just, they're just so bad. It was after Helene, right? So their permitting office is backed up. Mm-hmm. He's like, it's taking forever. I was like, how long? He's like, it's been like 2 months. And I'm like, come on, that's it's really good. I think it's quicker everywhere else.
Yeah, we're typically 2 months on the high end. Like if you get all your ducks in a row, you might be 30, 45 days around here. So yeah,
yeah. The permitting process in California, in Southern California, I can't pick on all of California, but in Southern California, it's you could turn it in and they'll give you a list of corrections 2 or 3 months after you submit. They give you a list of corrections. Mm-hmm. There might be 20 things on that list. And you send it back to the architect and you send it back to the engineer and you make some revisions and you send it back in. You wait another 2-3 months. They give you another 18 items to correct. I'm like, why didn't you just
why didn't you get the first time?
Yeah. And I think what they do, they pass it around the office to make, more eyes on it are better than one set of eyes, right? So I think they're doing like a checks and balances, but it's just, it gets, and that costs money. Right.
Yeah.
Again, people ask like, why is it so expensive in California to build? And it's everything we mentioned, but also the permitting process is enormous.
Yeah. I mean, the whole thing about doing like for like and making that process easier. I mean, that seems like that was a good thing.
That's
a good thing that they did.
Yeah.
I mean, how many people though are wanting to go back with the exact same footprint or within 110%? I mean, it's
maybe 5%.
I was going to say, it seems like if you're going to go through the hassle of rebuilding, you might as well go ahead and do what you want.
Exactly. That's that process that everybody's coming to that realization. That's what's taking some time. People are like, if I'm going to do it. I mean, one of the clients I have right now, we were under construction on their house. So they had a permit, but once that house burnt down, it was under construction. Once it burned down, they said, we did want a basement before. We're going to be waiting anyway. Might as well get the permit for the basement, and a lot of these houses in the Palisades, there was a good percentage of them. Palisades used to be a working class neighborhood, right? So a lot of the houses in there are post-war houses, not big, like 1,500 square feet.
Okay.
3-bedroom, 1 bath, 3-bedroom, 2 bath.
And that's not what people want today.
That's not what people want today. I mean, they were living in because of the legacy. Maybe they got passed down, and they were living in a $4 million house that was 1,800 square feet, had a view of the ocean, right? And now they're like, well, now it's burned down, and might as well get what we want. I think the people that are back quickest are the ones who there are instances of people that had their house built 2 years ago. They just moved in, right? So 2 years ago and it burned down. Yeah, I can just build the same house back.
Sure.
There's even this is heartbreaking. There's another story where an architect told me this. They went through the whole process to get a permit. House is right on the ocean. I mean, how long could that have taken to get that permit? Plus the design, plus the construction of it. The guy spent one night in the house and burned down the next day. Oh. Like they just moved in, burned down the next day.
Oh my
and that
God.
is so. I mean, he still got an active permit probably. Yeah. Right. He could go start right, but he may not even want to. He might like, oh, forget it.
Yeah.
You know?
What's crazy about that is if it was a new construction, you think that some of the standards it was built to might have kind of prevented it from burning down, right?
Yeah. Well, I keep going back to the hurricane code because I know it well. But, you know, the hurricane code is they rate it to what they think might happen. Nobody knows exactly what's going to happen, right? You know, so I mean, I think that house was pretty fire resilient, but man, that
it might have withstood a regular brush fire,
right,
but not 100-mile-an-hour wind blowing
right
sideways.
Right. I mean, that's what I was going to say. That fire burned hot.
Yeah. Well, hey, I want to kind of wrap this thing up. Just a few more kind of general questions. What's happening with the community there during the rebuilding process? Our neighbors. I mean, I guess people aren't living there necessarily, right? But are people coordinating, or are there a lot of disputes? Is there a lot of kind of cohesion and general consensus in the community about how things are being done, or is it a mess?
No, I think there's some consensus. I think it's good. There's like, you know, I think everybody in there, Palisades is a pretty tight community, tight knit community anyway. So now that this has happened, you know, whenever a disaster happens, usually people can bond together pretty well, and they have in the Palisades. I've been pretty impressed by it. Just the community feel of it. There's even there's a section of the Palisades Village that was built by Rick Caruso. I don't know if you're familiar with Rick Caruso, but he's a big developer out in California. Ran for mayor of LA. He was in the DW. He was a high up in the DWP for many years. He built a fire resilient shopping mall right on Sunset Boulevard in the Palisades, and they actually hired private fire to protect that building, and it was fire resilient. Right, had a slate roof, hardy siding, copper gutters, everything. You know. Anyway, just he's been a big leader in that area because he lives there, right, and he has interest there, right. And I saw him speak recently, and he said, as soon as the Palisades fire burned, you know, that was like a year ago. He said, we're gonna light the Christmas tree next year. If it's the last thing I do, we're still going to do that. And sure enough, this year they always like the Christmas tree in Palisades Village, and this year they did. And hardly any houses around. It looked like a war zone, but this Christmas tree was standing, and that I think that was pretty symbolic. You know, of the tight knit community and the resiliency of it.
It's really cool.
It was neat.
It seems like disasters like this have a tendency to kind of bring the community together. You know. Yeah. After the hurricanes come through a community, usually you'll see neighbors kind of pulling together to help each other make things happen. So unfortunately, sometimes it takes something like that to really pull people together. Yeah,
maybe that's what happens.
Yeah. So in general, I would assume that although it's a terrible disaster, a terrible thing to go through. Aside from just kind of the community coming together, I mean, ultimately, the housing stock, the city is going to be built in a much better manner and positioned better to do better next time this happens, right? Yeah. So that's one big positive that kind of comes out of this as well. Yeah. So if people live in a fire-prone area, or maybe not even a place that's traditionally thought of as being fire prone, but anybody who wants to improve their odds of survival in that type of event, what are some things that people could do to their existing house today to help their odds if this were to happen?
I think the low hanging fruit, the easiest ones would be get the vegetation away from your house. That's the key thing. And the exterior fire sprinkler system of some sort, right? Whether you have a pool in your backyard and you can draw water out of the pool, or you just want to risk it and put it on the municipal side. Something though. I mean, you see all the time these houses start burning, and it has to be automated because to my point, you see all these videos, guy up in this, oh, I'm not leaving. And he's got a garden hose spraying, I'm like, you can't risk your life over a house, right? I know a house can be replaced, right? You can be rebuilt, especially if it's insured. Even if it's not insured, you don't want to lose your life protecting a structure, right? So I would say something automated, and the easiest thing is get the vegetation away from your house, right? Yeah. And make sure all the attic vents are sealed up, and get a sprinkler system on it.
All right.
Yeah.
And the last one, how do you personally like handle kind of the emotional side of people who are dealing with this?
Yeah.
I know that, we've dealt with a lot of people again who are rebuilding after their houses got flooded and wiped out. It's always a really emotional process.
Yeah, it is. And I've talked to clients, and I try to be empathetic of what they've gone through, and I try to put myself in that position, so that then my interactions are automatically come from a different place, And sometimes when they want to talk about it, I just listen, right? I even had a client tell me, like, she's like, "You're almost like my therapist now," right? And I think people feel better when they hear practical advice, right? And not like, "Oh, it's gonna be okay," but they give you, you listen to them and give them practical advice how to move forward, right? Yeah. And also let them know, like I said, like, you're empathetic to it. You can feel it, When it first happened, I'm a builder, and when 6,000 houses burned down, you figure even if there's 100 guys in town like me, which there's not that I'm great. I'm just saying there's not 100 builders, right. Not 100 builders that build this kind of house, right, in town. Even if there were, that's a lot of house over the next 10 years. That's a lot of houses per company. I thought to myself, this is gonna be a lot of work, And my wife asked me, she's like, "Do you feel guilty?" And I was like, "No, I didn't start the fire. It's not malicious. I'm going to benefit from it, but I'm one of the good ones, right? I'm one of the guys that's not coming in from out of town. I've been here. I know the process, and I can help, right? So I kind of look at it that way. Like, and if somebody can sense that out of you, that you're not, I didn't move here from Denver.
You're not trying to put the hard sell on them.
Right. Yeah. And I talk to clients, and I even offered on my Instagram page, right? I mean, my advice is free. I like to talk, right? I talk on the phone all the time, and I tell clients, a realtor will call me and say, "Hey, I got this client. She doesn't know what to do." I'm like, "Have her call me. That's the least I can do in this situation, is just give my advice for free."
Yeah.
And people feel pretty good when they hear the advice of somebody that knows what they're talking about, that everything's going to be okay,
Absolutely.
Yeah. It kind of sounds like a Hallmark card, but
all right, Chris. Well, thanks for joining us to talk about this. Yeah. It's been fun, and it's something that I think a lot of my local people here don't think about, haven't thought much about. But this kind of thing is happening here in Texas. It's not just a California thing.
Anywhere, yeah.
Central Texas dealt with a lot of wildfires this year. Same kind of issues. So it's getting worse, and it's happening around the country. So it's something that I think everyone needs to have in their mind as a potential. So, so like I said, we're going to do another episode with Chris. We're going to record later on. That'll be on the week following. But in case people don't tune into that, and they happen to live in Southern California, and they want to talk to Costa Custom Homes about working together, how do they reach you?
Website is CostaCustomHomes.com. Instagram is Costa_US. And that's the best way. My phone number is on both of those. My personal phone number is on both of those links.
Spam them.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, Chris. Well, thanks for being here. Next episode is going to be a lot more lighthearted, I promise.
Yeah.
No more disasters. Chris and I will talk about kind of our history together and how he and I have both followed similar paths to where we are today. Yeah. So we'll see you then. Thank you. If you found value in this episode of Your Project Shepherd podcast, please consider leaving us a review and sharing it with your friends. That helps us expand our reach and bring this content to more people. Thanks for being here.